Welcome back to SM Sports Radio. We are finally actually in the same room and in person for the first time as I've moved back home to South Carolina for the summer, but we're excited to keep this going over the summer. And how about you? You ready for this?
Yeah, it's nice to not have to kind of wait awkwardly to see whose turn it is to talk.
Yeah,
We can just kind of go conversationally, which is really cool. Super excited to have you back in the area and super excited to talk some ball in person for the first time in what feels like forever.
yeah, really. Let's get right into it with the NFL draft that happened a couple weeks ago. And it was a very entertaining draft. There were a lot of trades. It started off pretty chalk, but got very not chalk very quickly with
Yeah.
a team pretty near and dear to your heart in the Atlanta Falcons. So I think that'll start us off on our winners and losers. We'll go ahead and start with the losers and your Atlanta Falcons here.
Yeah, I don't know if it's possible yet for us to put my reaction video onto this podcast episode, but if we can, that would probably be a fitting thing to do because like the rest of the NFL in general like the rest of Falcons fans, I was absolutely shocked by the decision to go with Michael Penix Jr. Can't say I can really fault the Falcons for getting their guy, but I can fault the Falcons for signing Kirk Cousins and guaranteeing him $100 million. So that got the draft off for my Falcons to a rough start. And like you said, a very weird and interesting draft from then on. We started off with, 14 offensive players in a row before
Yeah.
the Colts took Latu. So just like you said, just a crazy round one that led into a crazy rest of the draft as well.
6 quarterbacks in the top 12 for the first time ever, and for me at least, completely unexpected. I expected 4 in the top 12 for sure, but I thought Penix and Nix would fall out of the first
yeah.
round. But turns out these teams wanted their guy, and I guess for a position as valuable as quarterback, you just draft your guy when you can. But like you said, I thought it was especially odd for Atlanta, of all teams, to draft a quarterback with the giant contract they've given out to Kirk Cousins for 4 years. But I guess they like Penix a lot. It's just by the time that Kirk Cousins contract is done, he'll be 28, and you'll have to think about doing this all over again. So it just didn't make sense to me. And it continued in the second round with Rook Ororo out of Clemson, which, if you want interior defensive line, why not take the guy that went 2 picks after you and Jerzon Newton out of Illinois, who just is a better player in every sense of it on the interior? It's just very weird.
That was another puzzling one to me. I actually was walking out of the dining hall just looking at a big board of players available, possible fits to the Falcons. I saw Rook's name on there, and I was just like, man, there's just no way that with as early as the Falcons draft in this second round, there's no way that Rook Ororo is coming to Atlanta. I thought Johnny Newton would have been a perfect fit, like you said, but yeah, that was another shocker by the Falcons, and it's usually not great when the entire world is shocked by your first 2 picks.
Yeah, it's
But
not a place you want to be.
back to the Kirk Cousins thing, one thing that I have read into a little bit is that the Falcons do actually have an out after year 2 in that
That is
contract. And so let's say Kirk Cousins is regressing a little bit and you kind of want to move in that next direction. They can just cut ties with him after year 2 and then hand the reins over to Penix, which by that time he'll still be 26. So it's still a conversation, still a talking point to be had. But thankfully the Falcons aren't stuck guaranteed.
Yeah, it's still a bit odd, though.
For sure.
For all the first-round picks in this, I think it was the one that people questioned the most.
No
Then
doubt.
in the third round, they picked up Braylon Trice, who is a solid edge rusher, but is not overly athletic, didn't test well, even after slimming down a bit, which is a bit concerning. And then the one pick I did like of their first few is Brandon Dorless out of Oregon, who's a bit of a tweener, but I think can provide value as an inside-outside guy. I think like Darius Robinson light with a bit more interior first versus edge first as Robinson is. But a team whose draft I really liked was the Washington Commanders. They picked up Jaden Daniels at number 2, get their new QB of the future. And then their 2 second-round picks are 2 of some of my favorite picks in the entire draft, getting Jerzon Newton, who I thought could have been a first-round pick out of Illinois. Apparently he did have a fracture in his foot, which is why he fell a little bit. Then Mike Sainristil, slot corner out of Michigan. Very, very solid player who I think will be a great fit for this team as well that desperately needs secondary help because Emmanuel Forbes did not look great as a rookie.
Yeah, for sure. And great call on Daniels to the Commanders. You were all over that as soon as they signed Marcus Mariota to be their backup. And this new ownership with Washington, the new front office, new coaching staff, they're showing that they're not really playing any games. They're ready to win now, and that's why they got Jaden Daniels. They're making these other additions throughout the offseason, and I really like their draft as well.
Yeah, it's good down the board, too. Pick up Luke McCaffrey in the third, solid receiver. And then I like Dominique Hampton, their 5th-round pick out of Washington. I think he has good upside. Then Another team's draft who I really liked, I'm going to be a bit biased here. I'm going to show some love to my Chargers. I debated putting them on here or not, but I think this is a really good draft. Picked up the best offensive lineman in the class with Joe Alt at number 5, then addressed receiver and a type of receiver you really don't have in Ladd McConkey in the second round. And then the Junior Colson pickup in the third round was one of my favorite picks of the entire draft for any team. He was in my top 30 on my big board, and so to get him all the way down the board in the 60s in the third round, I think is an amazing pick. I like Tarheeb Still and Cam Hart, the 2 corners in the 5th round, and then Brendan Rice has upside. Put up great production at Southern Cal. It's just, can he separate at the next level, really? But overall, I liked my Chargers draft a lot.
How do you feel about passing on Malik Neighbors? What were your initial thoughts there?
I mean, it's going to be a bit disappointing always to not get a receiving threat of that magnitude, but based on the way Neighbors has looked in the post-draft process already, with just being kind of upset at everything, I don't know how much I would have loved him. I am sad we missed out on Rome Odunze, but if you're drafting to make a more dynamic offense, if Quentin Johnston does develop, if we're saying we're not writing off Quentin Johnston, he and Rome Odunze are similar types of players. So I can deal with passing on him, especially getting a player as good as Joe Alt. I think that sets you up to have a top 5 tackle duo in the NFL in a couple years with him and Rashawn Slater. So I'm okay with it, though I know there were some Chargers fans that were not over the moon about it.
Yeah, definitely a really good draft by the Chargers, and I think the Joe Alt pick in particular just shows that Harbaugh's kind of committed to his style of football, which we saw the power run scheme at Michigan. That's probably going to translate pretty well in the NFL, especially with the tackle duo like you mentioned. But, yeah, I'm a big fan of this draft for the Chargers as well.
Yeah, then back over to the losers there, we have the Tennessee Titans, who I wouldn't say there were a lot of teams that really had a bad draft in this draft, just the Titans were a bit underwhelming. Took J.C. Latham at number 7, maybe. Not quite the value on that pick. I think they were hoping that the Chargers would take receiver and Joe Alt would fall to 7, but pick up one of the next best tackles there. Then the Tavondre Sweat pick in the second round, there's the DUI stuff with him, and then he really doesn't have any pass rush upside. He's just a huge run-stuffing nose tackle, and to me at least, I know they play different positions, but you already have a big run stopper in Jeffrey Simmons, so why not, if you're going to draft a guy on the interior, draft a guy with some pass rush upside? So I didn't really understand that pick that much. And then Cedric Gray's a good player out of UNC. Jarvis Brownlee, I think, is okay out of Louisville. And then James Williams out of Miami is a safety with a RAS under 2, which is usually not what you want to see.
Yeah, and interesting to me, in as heavy of an offensive draft as this was, the Titans go 4 out of 5 of their picks on the defensive side of the
ball. For
a
bad offense, too.
Yeah.
It's not like they have an elite offense and need all the help on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, you bring in Calvin Ridley from Jacksonville, but beyond that, like, what playmakers do you have?
You have like 34-year-old DeAndre
Titans?
Hopkins and then Traylon Burks, who has not been good in the NFL so far. So I'm definitely concerned about that. It's going to be Tajay Spears' season for sure out there. Him and Tony Pollard in Tennessee. It's going to be interesting.
What a duo.
Wow, yeah. Fantasy disappointment written all over that offense.
Yeah, someone's going to draft Tajay Spears, and then randomly Tony Pollard's going to get all the touchdowns or vice versa. Something like that's going to happen.
You know, Tajay Spears only has an ACL in one of his knees. He's actually missing an ACL, just like Peyton Wilson, the NC State linebacker this year's draft. Yeah, there's your fun fact of the day. But talking about fun facts, I'm going to move on to some not fun facts as a Chargers fan here talking about the Kansas City Chiefs draft, which has me very scared. They traded up with, of all teams, the Buffalo Bills. How are the Buffalo Bills giving the Chiefs this pick to trade up for Xavier Worthy? It doesn't make sense at all.
That's like giving your bully at school more ammunition to bully you.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense.
That's what it seems like to me.
So the deep speed there, I know you have Hollywood Brown, but like he's whatever. Xavier Worthy's a better player. Kingsley Suamataia is a good developmental tackle out of BYU. The Jaden Hicks pick, how did they let this guy fall all the way down to pick 133? This is a guy in my top 50 on my draft board. He's a great box safety, can really be flexible, and just is a perfect fit for this Kansas City secondary, and that makes me really, really nervous once again because all these good players falling down the board. It feels like every DB that falls ends up in either Philly or Kansas City every year.
Yeah, and the scary part is you feel like the Chiefs just won a Super Bowl with their least talented roster in their dynasty era. I think we can call it a dynasty at this point with 3 titles. But yeah, adding Xavier Worthy, a guy with that Tyreek Hill-esque speed, we don't really know if he will have the same skill set as Tyreek Hill per se, but definitely has that same blazing speed. And Patrick Mahomes was happy with that pick.
Oh yeah, for sure. Then their last pick that I thought was notable here to talk about is Hunter Norzad. He's a center out of Penn State. This is a guy that a lot of people I follow on Twitter that are very into like offensive line scouting, and because I will admit I'm not an offensive line scout by any means, but this was a guy that was a draft crush of a lot of these offensive line experts that cover the draft. So look out for Hunter Norzad, and especially with the interior line depth they already have with Trey Smith, Creed Humphrey over there in Kansas City, that just got even better. So
Yeah.
definitely an interesting draft. I do have a couple more picks I want to talk about as some of the best picks of the entire draft. I have Cooper DeJean to the Eagles at round 2, pick 40. How did he fall that far?
Yeah, and how about the Eagles doubling up on corners with Mitchell and DeJean?
Yeah, they got
I know you're high on Mitchell too.
Yeah, Quinion Mitchell was my number 10 player in the entire class, and they picked him up at 22.
Yeah.
And then to get DeJean at 40. They just rebuilt their secondary in one draft, basically.
Just like that.
Yeah. Then Adonai Mitchell going to the Colts in round 2 at pick 52. Apparently there's some like off the field stuff. Like if he doesn't have his blood sugar regulated, he gets upset and he doesn't play at 100% all the time. But let's be honest, this is a really good receiver. He shouldn't have fallen this far.
Yeah, and it's good to see Chris Ballard coming out and defending him and saying a lot of that stuff's not true.
Yeah.
So Adonai Mitchell is going to be pretty much a very dynamic fit into that offense, a great weapon for Anthony Richardson if he can stay healthy this season. And all of a sudden, Indianapolis has one of the more fun offenses in the NFL.
Definitely. Just athletes out the wazoo over there with Josh Downs. Alec Pierce is a good deep threat. Xavier Worthy. Anthony Richardson, of course, according to the RAS metric, the most athletic quarterback of all time.
Yeah.
So freak athletes up there in Indy. Then, speaking of Indy, I want to talk about another good athlete out of my alma mater, Auburn, Jalen Simpson. Elite ball hawking safety. It seemed like he had a pick every game watching Auburn this season. Is really good at reading the quarterback's eyes and making plays in the secondary. And for a team that doesn't have a ton of safety depth, Julian Blackman's been okay, but outside of that, they don't have a ton in the back end. So I think Simpson's going to really inject life into that secondary. And to get him at pick 164, I think is incredible value.
Yeah, I don't really know too much about him, so I guess we'll have to take your word for it there. But yeah, I've been in love with what Chris Ballard has been doing with Indy for a while now. I think that he's going to continue to build on that. And I think we're going to see Indianapolis turn into a team that is in the playoffs 3 out of every 4 seasons moving forward.
Yeah, how about this AFC South, though, with the Houston Texans? If the Jaguars can finally put it all together, and then this new Colts team, this is going to be a very entertaining division, I think, here in the next couple of years.
Goes from being one of the worst divisions in football a couple of years ago to now being possibly one of the best.
Yeah, definitely. Then another pick I really liked was Devontae Walker out of North Carolina going to the Baltimore Ravens at pick 113, close to the top of round 4. This was Drake May's only help this year, and he didn't get to play the first half of the season because the NCAA decided this is the one player that isn't allowed to play after transferring for some reason.
And he actually had a reason. He wanted to get closer to family, I believe.
So ridiculousness from the NCAA as usual, but Tez Walker is such a great player. The hands were a big concern at the Senior Bowl. They're not a concern on tape. He did not have drop issues on tape. I don't know if he just was having a bad day or what, but I think it's going to be a really good pro. And then the last pick I want to talk about is Chris Abrams-Drain going to the Denver Broncos at pick 145. I think this Missouri corner duo kind of got slept on in the draft. Ennis Rakestraw, who went to the Lions, and now Abrams-Drain to Denver. These are 2 very good corners that played very well in the SEC all season. And though Rakestraw, I think, is a bit better of a player, Abrams-Drain is no slouch. And that Denver secondary needs a bona fide number 2 across from Pat Surtain. I think Abrams-Drain can be that guy.
Yeah, and Mizzou's cornerback duo there, you can it's not necessarily as good as the duo that Alabama had in McKinstry. It's
probably the second best
but
in the SEC,
it's got to be the second best. And so to get Abrams-Drain there in round 5, you got to think that's a steal for Denver.
Oh, definitely. Now we're gonna move over to the MLB, as that is it for our draft talk for today. And how about
I made it.
Let's
go.
You did. Congratulations.
Yes.
These divisions have been very entertaining so far. A lot of surprises, especially. Let's start in the 2 Central divisions, because I think this is where the most surprising things have come so far this season. The AL Central. How about the Cleveland Guardians, who just keep on plugging away?
Yeah, the power of friendship continues to be effective for the Cleveland Guardians, sitting at over a 600 winning percentage, so far this season. Pretty consistent throughout, sitting at 21-12 at the time of this recording. And then even staying within that AL Central, you got the Twins and the Royals playing some pretty good baseball.
The Twins are 10-0 in their last 10,
Yeah.
which I don't know if you know that. That's pretty good.
That's decent.
Then the Tigers still at 18-15. They're not even doing badly at
No.
all. They would be third in the AL East, and they would actually be tied for the AL West lead, but sit fourth in the Central.
Yeah, I can't say I expected the AL Central to be better than the AL West.
Yeah. And speaking of the AL West, how about the Oakland A's playing 500 baseball at 17-17? They just put up 20 on the Marlins,
And they're
but still,
and they're trying to lose.
Yeah.
That's what's crazy. Mason Miller comes in the ninth inning every time they have the lead and just slams the door shut. I don't think I've seen him blow a save yet this season.
You know what his K per 9 was this past month?
No.
It was 18.9.
My
It's
goodness.
disgusting. Over 2 strikeouts per inning is
Send him to a real team,
ridiculous.
I beg.
Yeah. Braves calling it the trade deadline.
Please. The credit card is on the table.
Yes. Alex Anthopoulos is going to trade for him and sign him to a 25-year, $3 per year deal with a gift card to Chick-fil-A.
Throw in Waffle House and he'll probably take it.
Yeah. Then the AL East, the Orioles are still atop that, but the Yankees are really close right behind them. Yankees have been a bit slow recently, going 5-5 in their last 10, just like the Red Sox, who have been really exceeding expectations to be above the Blue Jays and the Rays right now.
Yeah, the Blue Jays have been really disappointing. Guys like
Yeah.
Bo Bichette, Vlad
Bo Bichette's been
Guerrero,
terrible.
not really having good seasons, and that's kind of surprising, especially from the Blue Jays, because you think a trio of Bichette and Springer and Guerrero, even is Matt Chapman still there?
No, he's on the Giants.
Okay, disregard that. That trio you wouldn't think would be 16 and 18 as a core, but
Yeah, and
sitting
you look at the
sitting
pitching,
at fourth
too.
place in the AL
Kevin
East there.
Gausman, Jose Barrios, you would think this would be a solid rotation as well.
Alex Manoah. I mean,
Yikes. He got lit up in minor league ball. He's making his major league start again tonight, so see if it goes any better this time. See if the pressure is indeed just something you put in your tires or if it gets
Yeah,
to
we'll
him once
see.
again. But this Blue Jays team has just perpetually underperformed in recent years, and I'm about sick of the Blue Jays at this point, honestly. So that's it for the AL. But as far as the National League, over to the National League Central, how about the Brewers, who just keep winning somehow?
yeah, another team that I feel like the Guardians, kind of has that power of friendship going. Not too many big name stars. Obviously, you got Christian Yelich, who is back in MVP form, kind of. William Contreras.
He's been great.
Has been
this
pretty
season.
good for the Brewers, one of the best catchers in baseball. And then you've just got a lot of youth on that team that's kind of the glue that holds it all together. And like
Yeah.
you said, leading the NL Central as it stands right now, 6-4 in their last 10.
Yeah, the Cubs are right there with them at 20-14. My Reds have kind of taken a nosedive as everyone not named Ellie De La Cruz has forgotten how to hit a baseball over
Yeah.
the last 2 weeks. It's really sad that the Reds' starting pitching ERA over the last 2 weeks is under 3, and yet 3-7 in their last 10 games. So the bats cannot get it going right now.
And it doesn't help when you got a couple players on the injured list that are very
Yeah.
impactful players.
Matt McClain is probably the best get-on-base contact hitter on the entire roster,
Yeah.
and might not even be back this season, which is tough. TJ Friedel still out. He's making his rehab assignment right now in Louisville, but hopefully we get him back because we're right barely out of the Cardinals and Pirates, which is not where you want to be.
Yeah, and the Pirates have made their annual strong start and then fall off a cliff.
Yes.
They're all the way back down.
The Pirates'
in
April
fifth in the
insanity
division.
run is over.
And it seems like it happens pretty much every year now. They'll
Yeah.
start out super hot and then just fall off a cliff, but not surprised to see that.
No. But speaking of things that might be surprising, how about the NL East, where for once it is not the Braves atop the division?
Yeah, the Philadelphia Phillies have been playing really good ball, 8-2 in their last 10, and a lot of that, I will give credit to the Phillies, definitely playing great baseball, 23-11 when we're recording this, but the Braves really have not been getting the production that they expected to see out of the top guys in their lineup. Acuna really struggling. He's starting to come out of his slump just a little bit, but Matt Olson is below the Mendoza line,
Yeah.
average-wise, not really getting the power numbers that we saw from him last season. And what's interesting about that is a lot of his just straight metrics are pretty much the same. Like his batting average, the only major difference, his batting average on balls in play is like 150 lower than it was last season,
Yeah.
but his barrel rate is pretty much the same. His chase rate is pretty much the same. His K rate is pretty much the same.
The luck metric is just taking a
Yeah,
dive
it's
off
just
a cliff.
taking a nosedive. Austin Riley is another guy that struggled for most of the season, kind of coming out of it in this series with the Dodgers. We'll see what happens in Game 3 of that series with the Dodgers taking the first two. Bryce Elder getting absolutely lit up last night. Max Fried's coming back into form a little bit. He's on the mound for Game 3 today for the Braves. But, yeah, the Phillies looking like they have the best starting rotation in baseball right now.
Mariners.
Yeah.
Mariners.
That's debatable. I feel like you can make an argument for the Phillies.
There's some crazy stat where the Mariners pitchers, starting pitchers, have allowed like 20 earned runs in their last 21 starts or something ridiculous like that.
I can vouch for that because they just took 2 out of 3 from the Braves, in which they held the Braves lineup to under 3 runs.
It's a
in
disgusting
each of those 3
rotation.
starts. Yeah.
Yeah, and then below the Phillies and the Braves, it is the Washington Nationals sitting at third, tied with the Mets at 16 and 17, and then the Marlins are maybe a baseball team.
They already punted on May the 3rd or May 4th whenever they traded Luis Arias
to the Padres. And the Padres are only going to be paying him league minimum as well as the
Crazy.
Marlins retain most of that contract, which is ridiculous. But speaking of the Padres, they sit in second in the NL West behind the Dodgers, who are really starting to separate themselves from the rest of this division.
Yeah, for sure. And the last time we had an MLB talk, it was a little more neck and neck between the Padres and the Giants, or the Padres and the Dodgers, excuse me. But the Dodgers, like you said, kind of separating themselves. Yamamoto kind of settling into his own. Other than that one pretty bad start in Korea, he's had a pretty good season beyond that.
He's been good. Then Tyler Glasnow, too, has been absolutely locked in recently, leading the MLB in strikeouts and tied for MLB lead in wins. So he's been amazing so far.
Yeah, 6 wins for Tyler Glasnow. Just beat the Braves on Saturday night. Just continuing his run of dominance when he's been healthy, as he did with the Rays last season.
Yeah, healthy Tyler Glasnow is always good to see. You always like it when these guys are actually able to stay healthy. But I'm curious to see if the Diamondbacks can get it turned around. Sitting at 14 and 20 right now, fourth in this division, just cannot seem to get any form of consistency from anyone not named Ketel Marte. And Corbin Carroll's been bad.
Yeah, Corbin Carroll has really struggled this season a lot. And just interestingly enough, the Arizona Diamondbacks have both scored and allowed 164 runs this season. So they have a run differential of 0.
Consistent. Yeah.
Sitting at 14 and 20 in the NL West.
That is it for the divisions. Now, one guy we did want to spotlight for the Chicago Cubs, who's been amazing thus far, a guy that you picked for your NL Rookie of the Year, it is Shota Imanaga, who has just been amazing.
Yeah, the 30-year-old has had 6 starts. He's 5-0 in those starts with a .78 ERA, a .75 WHIP, and 35 strikeouts. He's a rookie, but he's 30 years old and kind of brings a veteran presence to the mound.
Yeah.
Doesn't look like a rookie at all, obviously coming over from Japan, and has pretty much undoubtedly been the better of the 2 pitchers coming over from Japan.
Oh, definitely.
Thus far. Yamamoto's been pretty good since that first start, like we mentioned.
Imanaga's just been the best pitcher in baseball. I think you have to say that.
Imanaga's just been incredible. Not only is he probably the National League Rookie of the Year favorite, he's probably the National League Cy Young favorite if the season ended today.
He's been incredible, and one thing I love about him is it's just so clear that he enjoys playing baseball.
Yeah.
You watch him out there on the mound, he's smiling all over the place. The video of when Tyler O'Neill took him dead center on Fenway, he was just looking up the wall like...
Yeah, just admiring it like a fan.
It's great to watch him. He's super entertaining. It's just unfortunate for me as a Reds fan that he's on the Cubs. Makes me a bit sad.
Yeah.
But let's talk about some other standout performers right now in the MLB. And let's start with baseball's OPS leader, Mookie Betts, who continues to just hit every pitch thrown at him, it seems.
Yeah, actually my National League MVP pick, he finished in second last season, absolutely tearing the cover off the ball this season. Got an OPS over 1,000. He's also got a lot of RBIs from that spot, got a high slugging percentage. He's continuing to be that player that we saw last season for LA that's just going to consistently get on base at the top of the lineup for that murderer's row of Betts, Ohtani, Freeman. And
yeah, it's terrifying.
Nobody really wants to see that top 3. And what's even scarier is Freeman really hasn't gotten going yet.
Yeah.
It's really just been Betts and Ohtani so far.
It's not something you want to see if you're another NL West team, especially with how the Dodgers' rotation is clicking right now. If all three of these at the top of the lineup start figuring it out, I think it's pretty much done for everyone else.
Definitely.
Then let's talk about home run leaders, and a guy that I don't think anyone expected to be up here. It's Gunnar Henderson, tied with Mike Trout at 10. And Mike Trout, knee surgery again. It's devastating.
He's going to be stuck at 10 for a while.
Yeah.
If we hope he can get back this season, but definitely going to miss a lot of time. And when I checked the home run leaders and saw Gunnar Henderson, I kind of did a double take because I was like, really? Gunnar Henderson has the most home runs in baseball. That's crazy.
Out of everyone on the Orioles team, this is not who I'd expect to be up there. If you were saying just pure power, I'd probably say Anthony Santander would be up there. Sure. But Henderson's been on fire so far this season. Took it to my Reds over the weekend. Had a great series versus them.
Maybe the universe got confused, and instead of splitting batting success between Henderson and Holiday, since they look alike, maybe they just gave it all to Gunnar Henderson, and Jackson Holiday is just like,
got sent back down.
Go back to AAA Norfolk. Like, that's gotta hurt.
Yeah. They all look the same. Even Heston Kierstad.
Yeah, it's crazy.
They just keep cloning the same
the long
guy.
Blonde hair. It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Right. Moving on to RBIs, another guy that's really had a great start of the season, Alec Boehm. And then we know what Marcell Ozuna's been doing so far this season. Ozuna from the Braves. Yeah,
Boehm has been a top 3. Boehm is a top 3 hitter in the National League right now, just stats-wise, 32 RBIs and batting .364.
Yeah, leads the MLB.
Yeah, and when you add Alec Boehm clicking on all cylinders to a lineup that already features guys like Harper, Trey Turner, Kyle Schwarber, that's pretty scary.
Yeah, and Nick Castellanos hasn't even done anything yet.
He's done
this
nothing.
He has the second lowest OPS of eligible stat leaders in baseball.
I don't think so.
I don't think he has either. Let me double check that right quick. But I'm pretty sure he has not hit a home run.
Yeah, but the Phillies just continuing to roll, and that's what makes it even scarier.
No, he has 2. He has 2 homers.
Those must have been very recent because
I
remember checking about a week and a half ago, and he still had none.
There must have been a national tragedy or something.
Hold on to your loved ones, folks.
Yes. Then slugging percentage, it is Shohei Ohtani in the lead at .633.
No surprise there.
Not at all. He's been absolutely ripping the baseball. Then ERA, we talked about Imanaga already and his dominance. Then strikeouts, Glasnow has the swing and miss pitch working so far this year. He's been great. And then a guy that is not quite up there for strikeout leaders, but I think might get there eventually, is my guy Nick Lodolo. He's struck out 7 and 11 his last 2 outings and has really been just dealing this year so far. So I think if he keeps this going, he might end up at the top of this leaderboard by the end of the year.
Yeah, and how about Jared Jones being second in strikeouts in limited pitch count appearances so far? He's looking like the next coming of Spencer Strider. Knock on wood.
The Pirates are only allowed one good starter at a time. Last year was Mitch Keller. This year is Jared Jones. So.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, Jared Jones. I'm not wishing a torn UCL on you.
Yeah.
like Spencer Strider.
Yeah.
That's why I knocked on the table there.
Then moving over to WHIP, it is Ranger Suarez of the Philadelphia Phillies, a guy that absolutely diced up my Reds when they played. That was a very sad game to watch. He was fully in command, and this is a guy that's a sinker baller, a pitch-to-contact guy that has just been not allowing any hard contact or any balls in the air at all, just all soft grounders of the infield. And he and Glasnow, 2 very different pitchers, but tied for the MLB lead in pitching wins, both at 6.
Yeah, Suarez has a complete game shutout this season, and scary thing about that, I know I've said a lot of things about the Phillies are scary, but in reality, Ranger Suarez is their number 3.
Yeah.
Behind
Nola,
Wheeler and Nola,
yeah.
Which is crazy to think about, but an extremely efficient guy that kind of reminds me of Max Fried in terms of just his pitch to contact, low pitch counts throughout the game, able to go deep into the game. Max Fried has a complete game as well this season. So a couple of lefties in the NL East just staying consistent, getting those ground balls this season.
Yeah, this might be a very lefty-heavy division when you look at those 2, then Josiah Gray for the Nationals, and some of these lefties start. Jesus Luzardo for the Marlins. Yeah. A lot of these lefty starters out here in the NL East. But anything else for Major League Baseball? You want to talk about some basketball transfer portals?
Let's talk about some basketball. That sounds good.
So we're going to start it off with Kansas, the team that started last season ranked number 1 and then kind of did nothing. So they've gotten, it feels like everyone out of the transfer portal. AJ Storr out of Wisconsin, my guy Riley Kugel from Florida, not my guy Rylan Griffin from Alabama, who scared me to death every time my team played Alabama this year because he could just feel like make a shot from anywhere at any time. And then South Dakota State's Zeke Mayo coming in as well.
Yeah, so these are all guys that, I mean, AJ Storr, leading scorer for Wisconsin this past season. Zeke Mayo, leading scorer for an NCAA tournament team in South Dakota State. He was over 20 points per game. Rylan Griffin can shoot the ball well over at Alabama. Riley Kugel, a former 5-star. We know the talent that he has.
Kugel's an elite athlete. He just, with the guard play that Florida had this season from Will Richard and Walter Clayton Jr., didn't find himself in the lineup that much, but the athleticism is definitely there. He had an amazing game versus Auburn in Gainesville, absolutely diced up Auburn in that one. So, like you said, the talent is definitely there. I think if Bill Self can get him worked into the system, I think he can definitely produce.
And you add these guys to Hunter Dickinson has already declared that he's coming back. DeJuan Harris, probably, in my opinion, the best pure point guard in college basketball that is returning. You give him all these weapons on the perimeter to work with, and then KJ Adams down there at the 4, just a freak of nature. And the one knock on Kansas basketball this past season that showed its ugly head time and time again was their lack of depth, and that problem has been solved by Bill Self. They're about 8-9 deep now, all with guys that, like, I just look at these transfer additions, and it almost seems like an invite, like an all-star game from high school, like, all put on one team. And you add that to arguably a top 5 coach in college basketball history, and I think we might be seeing the Kansas Jayhawks having a deep run in March of 2025, which is crazy to talk about on May 5th of 2024. But if I had a gun to my head and said was asked who is going to be national champion in 2025, I think I would have to say Kansas.
I'm no Kansas guy for sure, but I would love to see Riley Kugel be able to make a deep tournament run because he's a guy that gave a ton to Florida basketball and just ended up kind of getting shuffled out of the rotation at the end of his time. So I think he deserves the success for sure. Then moving over to a team that kind of just had a meteoric rise and then a meteoric crash and burn back down to earth in the Michigan Wolverines and new coach Dusty May, who has landed Vlad Golden from FAU, Sam Walters of Alabama, Roddy Gale Jr. of Ohio State, Auburn's Trey Donaldson, and then Yale's Danny Wolf, which that trio there, Trey Donaldson, Auburn, Sam Walters, Alabama, Danny Wolf, Yale. A lot of interlocked teams right there, all sending guys to Michigan.
Yeah, super interesting. Obviously not as overwhelming as Kansas's transfer portal haul, but you're building this Michigan program pretty much from scratch. A lot of the guys in the previous coaching staff had recruited, opting to enter the transfer portal, but then May's able to land best big man in the portal. Well, I'll say second best big man in the portal, and Vlad Golden. Go ahead and bring him up to Ann Arbor. And then Sam Walters, Roddy Gale Jr., those are solid role players. Trey Donaldson, he has shown flashes.
He's a good facilitator. He's not going to shoot the lights out by any means, but very good at ball movement, very good at finding the open guy.
And then Danny Wolf, another 7-footer that can shoot the ball super well. You pair him with Vlad Golden, and you can possibly have 2 7-footers in a starting lineup. That's scary to think about in general.
I saw Zach Edey and said, we'll do that.
Yeah, and so you couple that with the fact that you get a coach with Final Four experience and Dusty May, and that's a top 3 offseason for me so far. And staying in the Big Ten, we're going to go with Indiana as the 3rd most impactful transfer portal season. They add Omar Ballo from Arizona. We know what he meant to that program, just an absolute force inside, even in the loss to Clemson in the Sweet 16. Just had a period of 5 or 6 possessions where it seemed like he scored 5 or 6 times in a row, just punishing Clemson's guys down low. P.J. Hall and Ian Shefflin really had a long day trying to guard him. Then another guy, Kanan Carlisle, out of Stanford, who had I think he had 6 games of 23-plus points over on the wing on a not very good team. Miles Rice from Washington State, the number 2 option on an NCAA tournament team, looking for a new home as Washington State is in the dreaded Pac-2 right now. And then and then another role player wing, Luke Good from Illinois. And once again, no one else is gonna have as overwhelming of a transfer class as Kansas did, but this is very solid for Indiana, a program that has been nationally relevant in basketball for many, many decades and kind of has fallen from that under head coach Charles Woodson. But Assembly Hall, fact of the matter, is a top 5 venue in college basketball when Indiana is good. And Indiana is one of those teams that when they're good, college basketball is just better.
Yeah.
We talk about that in other sports. Like you were mentioning how football is better when Miami is good. It's kind of the same deal with Indiana in basketball.
Yeah, this is a team that I would love to see make a run this year. I love Cannon Carlisle a ton. He was super fun to watch at Stanford this past year. It was one of those players that just made you wish the team around him was better so you get more national exposure. But I completely agree. Basketball is better when Indiana is good, especially the Purdue-Indiana rivalry in basketball is so storied, and then recently it felt like Indiana hasn't had a ton go their way. So maybe with Zach Edey leaving Purdue now, this is Indiana's year to bounce back with this class.
And then the final team that I didn't really prepare to talk about because they didn't really have a huge transfer portal season. But, folks, the Alabama Crimson Tide are going to be a force to be reckoned with. It's looking like Mark Sears and Grant Nelson will both be back, and they're adding Cliff Amori from Rutgers. That's a center that gets added into this lineup. I think
my Rutgers super team.
He's probably gonna lead the country in dunks for that Alabama.
Yeah.
With that high-paced Alabama offense. We saw what Mark Sears can do in big situations. Alabama was the team that played UConn the closest all season, other than their dismantling at Creighton, which rip Creighton
forever in our hearts.
Another time, forever in our hearts. But Alabama is going to be really good next season as well.
Yeah, as an Auburn fan, it's slightly discouraging to see that, but Auburn picked up J.P. Pegues from Furman, so good, very
friend
good,
of the program.
Yes, friend of the program, J.P. Pegues, but good mid-major transfer. But this Alabama team is very scary. Grant Nelson, I think, is on first team all annoying to play against in the NCAA.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
Then Mark Sears is just one of those players where no matter what team is on, you just have to respect his game. He's elite.
For sure.
But unless you have anything else, I think that wraps up the first in-person Seneca, South Carolina edition of SM Sports Radio.
Yeah, I'm very excited for us to maybe get a more consistent studio home at some point.
We have an excellent gray wall here.
But this was good enough for starters on load preparation, getting my wisdom teeth out here shortly.
We're going to record another podcast tomorrow where Samuel has no coherence of what he's talking about.
Yeah, we'll have to make that one explicit coded just in case. We don't know what I'll be talking about there, but that's why we're recording this one a little bit early. But we're super excited to get back in a routine and kind of establish what we want this to look like in person, but glad you've tuned in to this edition.
Yep, we will see you guys again next week.